So everybody, welcome to part two of the three-part series on what's working, sales development in the COVID-19 world. Part two is on SDR management, which is a challenge that a lot of leaders are going through right now with their teams used to all be in one place on a sales floor, a bustling sales floor, and now they're all working remote, which brings a whole host of new challenges. Part one last week was on messaging. Today is on SDR management, and it's such a huge topic and so much to cover that I couldn't do it alone. So I brought a host or a panel on to talk more about it. So let's jump right in. So this is a three-part series. Next week is going to be on onboarding and coaching. And at the end, we'll talk a little bit about that. So let's go ahead and meet the panelists. So panelists, we're going to go one by one. Tell us a little bit about yourselves, the teams that you manage, tell a little about your company, and to make it fun, tell everybody one restaurant that you're really looking forward to get back to when everything's back to normal. So let's start with Julie Mann, Senior Director of Global Sales Development. Julie, welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I am Julie Mann. I run the global SDR team for Optimizely. We're at about, 23 people, I think, total. So spread out all over from Amsterdam to Sydney, Australia, to Austin, which is where I'm based out of, and my Austin, the biggest part of the team is housed. Optimizely, if you guys don't know, is the leader in progressive delivery and experimentation for product and engineering teams. And so our goal is to help product and engineering teams build the right products for their customers on every digital touch point, and then build the product the right way. And the company has, I would say we're probably in the first wave of work from homers. So March 6th was our work from home quarantine date, which was a little bit earlier than most of my colleagues. So hopefully there's some hacks and learnings along the way that we've pieced together, being, a month and a half in already. So excited to be here, and thank you for having me.
Yeah. So what's the restaurant that you're?
Oh, restaurant. Gosh.
Austin's got a lot of them.
I mean, my favorite, everyone knows this about me in the Austin office. My favorite restaurant is Matt's El Rancho. Real Tex-Mex, like very old school Austin restaurant. Been here maybe 60 years, something like that.
Yeah.
And they have the best, queso, which is not just like a cheese dip. If you're not from Austin, ask me later. I'll teach you all about it. But the best queso and enchiladas and tacos, and they're in South Austin, probably close to Jackson. He probably gets it a little bit more frequently than I do as a northerner now.
I'm going to go check it out. I don't spend enough time getting Tex-Mex.
Oh. And if you drink, the best Mexican martinis out there. I don't, so I'm missing those, but yeah.
And the vibe there is really awesome too. So Julie, Amsterdam to Austin, huh? The team spread out? Wow.
Yep. And then we have one Lone Ranger in Sydney, Australia.
Wow.
Cool.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thanks so much for being here. All right, next up, Bryan Elsesser, Senior Director of Sales Development at Aircall. Bryan, welcome.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. So I am Bryan Elsesser. I am the Senior Director of Sales Development at Aircall. That is all on the slide. This is good. So far, we're all in this right place. So I'm I oversee our outbound division over at Aircall. Aircall is a cloud-based phone system, which is a phone that speaks with the tools that businesses use every single day, especially for sales and support teams. In essence, we try to make you guys more efficient and make it so you have like one fluid motion in your sales process. And we've been working almost just tremendously right now with remote teams, given everything going on, you could imagine. So it's been very busy for us. That being said, so like I said, I oversee the outbound division. It's a team of about 50 individuals that we are, all responsible for going and finding those non-hand raisers and telling the good mission and story of Aircall. So it's a fun, exciting team, a lot of rock stars. And then, so I'm the only New Yorker on this call, which, I can't relate to Tex-Mex because I feel like New York Tex-Mex isn't Tex-Mex. So in essence, but what I can say is I can't wait to get back to, there's a little restaurant in New York City called Hugh Kitchen. which is a paleo-friendly restaurant. I don't know if anybody's a paleo enthusiast on here, but I certainly am. It's a lifestyle that I've been living now. So, but this is an incredible restaurant. Everything in it is paleo-friendly. It all is absolutely delicious, and it's probably the first stop I'm making for lunch as soon as I get back to New York City in 2027 when we all go back. Outside of that, yeah. What did I miss?
No, you got everything.
All right, good.
Yeah, appreciate it. All right, last but not least, Jackson, the hometown hero, Hawkins.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, I'm a delivery manager at memoryBlue, and I oversee a team of SDRs working on a variety of campaigns, ranging from data analytics to recruitment automation. I feel that something that maybe sets me apart a little bit from our other esteemed panelists is that before management, I had 8 years of experience as a sports coach. So I very much embody that in my management style, but mostly I see myself as being lucky to just have a front row seat to learn from Bryan and Julie. So, and then my restaurant, I think that I am not the only person in my office that misses Veracruz tacos. It was a former taco truck that built a brick and mortar store because they were so successful, and Austin is the taco capital of the country. So I can't wait to get back to Veracruz.
Veracruz is legit.
Right across the street. Awesome. All right, great. Well, thanks so much, everybody, again, for being here. So here's kind of the breakdown of how everything's going to work. So the first set of questions are going to be for everyone to answer, all about personal experiences, how you've handled certain situations or how you're handling certain situations. So we're really looking for stories here and things that people can take away. The next set of questions are going to be more pointed towards advice that you would give to all the SDR leaders that we have here on the call. So this will be kind of geared towards one of you, and then we'll branch out from there and let anybody else chime in with their thoughts. One thing that I haven't really noticed a lot of panels doing around this topic is asking about the future of when we do get back to whatever normal is, what are some things that we could be looking forward to? Bryan and I had a great conversation about that just a couple of days ago. So looking to hear your thoughts there. And then audience, everyone listening in, please use the Q&A function throughout the program. And towards the end, we will take your questions and see what questions you all have for the panelists. So let's jump right in to questions about personal experiences. I've made it easy, a little easier. So this is the order that we'll go in. So each of the slides will have or just to make it a little bit easier for people not talking over each other. So take yourself back to what feels like years ago at this point. It's day one, working from home. I know for each of you that was a different day, but it's day one working from home. What was the first thing that you did with your team to set the tone in this new world that we're in? Bryan, we'll start with you.
First off, let me just call out the fact that I love that you did this on this slide. Good for you. It's really well done. This anyone watching at home that's going to be putting together a webinar, I would consider this best practice. That's really cool. So, all right, I think it started for me day -1. It wasn't day one, and the reason why is because we realized we were going remote pretty quickly, and in doing so. We had to figure out a way in which we were going to have everybody set up for success. So how we did that. Right up front, we had to build out a plan and set the tone of expectations of what the team was going to be coming up against in the first part of being remote. So we pretty much said, hey, look, we're going to have morning calls. We're going to have afternoon calls. We expect you guys to be on them. We're going to talk a lot about metrics. We're going to get really personal in the weeds with a lot of different, email communications or phone calls that you've been having with your customers, but we're going to pretty much address everything as a team. And we had a working document that we pretty much typed out, laid out in a moment's notice, and then rolled out to the team by the end of day, which was the day before we went remote. So day one going remote, instead of focusing on the things that what are the expectations of you, it was really focused on, okay, is everybody comfortable? And I think that's, the most important piece that we needed to find is that, do you have a place that you can work? Does it have reliable internet? Are you in a place where you'll be able to think clearly? To call it out up front is that, when you go remote after you've been working in an office environment for so long, the brain neurons, all those brain connections that you've made in your work. Like I'm at work and now I have my work brain turned on. All those connections are disconnected when you're at a home environment and you have to work. And so you have to build new connections, which means most of your team would feel somewhat unsettled prior to even getting into the work. So it was really, the whole first week was about not only execution, but comfortability and making sure that we had that set up. I think from there, we'll get into that, but I think from there, we had to find some new ways in which we could, continue our culture and continue our work together that we so often did in the office.
Awesome. Yeah. So focus on comfortability, right? Making sure everyone's got everything set up properly and that, they're kind of get to some degree of normalcy working from home, right?
Yeah,
awesome.
Absolutely.
Jackson.
Yeah, so I think that on day one, obviously, all that we knew is that there was a radical change happening for an undetermined amount of time. And with every change like that, there comes an opportunity. And so making sure that the SDRs are framing this as a positive in their mind and understanding the opportunity that lies before them to make a good impression on their company, to generate business despite the current climate. And the problem that, or perhaps a potential issue that I foresaw was, like Bryan was saying, whenever you take them out of that familiar environment, habits are going to fall by the wayside. They're going to change. So we need structure. And so at that time, I instituted, we always have a daily huddle at the end of the day. There are weekly one-on-ones, things like that in the office. Not only should all of those things remain, but we actually upped our huddles to 2 a day. So we now have an AM and a PM huddle. And that AM huddle is used not only to go over metrics thus far in the day, it usually happens about 10 o'clock in the morning, but also to lay out goals. And those goals are not necessarily just handed down by me, but the SDRs are expected to come to that meeting with their goals. If I feel that they are shorting me and giving me ambitious goals, then I will push them a little bit on that, but I will make them quantifiable. I will make them give me numbers. And then in the PM huddle, we are then accountable for those goals. So at the end of the day, rather than being a micromanager that said, I told you to do this much today, why haven't you done it? Instead, it becomes, you told me that this is what you were going to do today, so let's make sure that we get that met. And I think that they really appreciate the structure. I'm sure some of them would disagree with me, but I think all in all, it's appreciated.
Yeah, the chat's blowing up for some reason. No, I'm kidding. Cool. All right, Julie.
Okay, what did we do? So our day one, just to paint the picture a little bit, was March 5th, I believe, and it was 5:15 p.m., so end of the day, and people were starting to pack up, get ready to leave, and I knew there was going to be some communication coming out, so I told the team to hang out. We got a communication that we would be away from the office for 2 weeks. We worked in a WeWork space, so maybe more at risk than others, and so our company made a great decision, I think, to kind of get us moving out sooner. So what we did was, first and foremost, make sure that our team was technically supported. So a lot of the folks on my team don't have home offices and don't have the dual monitors, which are crucial to their success, don't have their own individual keyboards or mice. So in as organized as a way as possible, we raided the office. Whether we were really allowed to do that or not, who's to say? But we decided to, I told my team, take everything that you're going to need. Take your monitors, take your keyboards, take your mice, take every little thing that you're going to need. And everyone was schlepping, all of it to the parking lot. So we made sure, first off, technically, did you have what you needed to be successful in a home environment? And then moved more to, the emotional support. So I have a really great manager underneath me that I work with who, set out a plan that her and I could tag team on checking in on people. What do they need? How did they like to be managed under this circumstance? And setting up a cadence in our meetings to do that. And then I think lastly was, how do we support the business? So we created a document. I say we, she did most of the heavy lifting. She did an incredible job creating a document, outlining very specifically what are the expectations. Like day one, let's make sure we're all on the same foot on the same page. What are the expectations that working from home that we have for the SDRs working from home? And so what does that look like from a metric standpoint? What are the priorities that we're expecting everyone to get through? What are the cadences of the meetings that we need? There's a lot of, peer-to-peer training and coaching that just happens naturally. So how can we set up some extra times to make sure the team's able to bounce questions off each other? All of that came out within, I'd say an hour, and we had it to the team by the next morning so that they understood what those expectations were and how we could kind of partner together through this.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, structure seems to be kind of a common theme, is like we're trying to establish some type of structure with everything happening. So that's great. Okay, cool. Question number 2. We'll switch up the order a little bit. What was the biggest change that you saw? And it'll be interesting to get Julie's point of view, since you started the working from home a lot earlier. What was the biggest change that each of you saw from weeks 1 and 2 to weeks 3 and 4, when people were more settled in, kind of starting to get into their groove? Julie.
Yeah. There was a big adjustment period, I would say. So during week 1 and 2, I saw people on my team and myself really struggling to find balance and what their new life was going to look like. How could they not overwork? And honestly, that was the problem I saw more than like people not putting in the time. It was that there was no clear schedule or structure to their day, that the morning bled into the evening, and hey, may as well knock out, a couple pieces of work at 8 p.m. There wasn't a set structure for them to understand when they start work, when they leave. I think the other big noticeable difference for me was that I wasn't sure, I wasn't able to read faces anymore. So I wasn't sure if people were digesting the content that we were giving them, if the meetings were really helpful. We were asking for a lot of feedback, and it wasn't the same as seeing people's faces and really understanding and kind of anticipating what they needed. So that was a big change, and something that I think to week 3 and 4, we were able to sort of solve. We set up parking lot meetings every single weekend. We call them parking lots, where if anybody had any questions, they could put them in this parking lot doc and then come to the group meeting and say, hey, I'm struggling with this or that. And it was a way for them to get that peer feedback. We set up a special Wednesday meeting where we looked at granular metrics and tried to give people insights of what was working and what wasn't, so they could make better decisions in the future. So, and then people did create a structure. I think more importantly, you saw people saying, yep, I start my day at 8:30. That's when I'm, fully dressed and at my desk and doing my work. I do take a lunch break. I'm going for a walk for 10 minutes at this time. You saw that structure fall into place, which delineated in some way, what was work and what was, pleasure and kind of personal time.
Awesome. And then the parking lot meetings you're talking about, those are optional meetings?
Yep.
Okay.
They're all optional. So it's not a requirement. The goal is to not over coddle a team and say, I need to micromanage you. The goal is to say, if you need that time to bounce off ideas and you're somebody that gets a lot of energy from that, we want to have that time for you.
Awesome. That's awesome. Jackson.
Yeah, so I would say probably the biggest change that I saw was in the disposition and the response of the team. As whenever we first got the work from home communication, I think it's human nature. It's kind of exciting. There's this new thing that's going on. It's almost like we never get past that point when we were kids and we find out that there's a snow day, or there are no snow days in Texas, but a weather day or something like that. So that excitement quickly wore off, and moving into, end of week 1, beginning of week 2, there was almost a general melancholy, for lack of a better word, that kind of started to take over. And so moving into weeks 3 and 4, I think that melancholy came from missing the energy of the sales floor. They like to give managers a lot of flack because we're big on the energy of the sales floor, and then whenever they're without it, I think they actually start to miss it. And so in weeks 3 and 4, you kind of saw them really positively respond and look to retake that energy and seek each other out for collaboration, and set up collaboration sessions if they were on a similar campaign, or if they had an issue that they felt another SDR was strong, and really seek out that interaction and that collaboration collaboration. And I'm really pleased with the response. I feel like they've hit their stride.
Definitely awesome. Bryan, bring us home.
Yeah, I mean, first off, by the way, Jackson, we don't get snow days in New York either, so there's that. But you know, I think first and foremost, the thing we saw change, right? Week 1 and 2 was closing out a quarter for us, and week 3 and 4, I think, is really kicking off the next. We were forecasting a really strong finish to Q1 where, you know, we were going to be well ahead of goal, well ahead of pace. The biggest change we saw was actually probably in the buyer. And the buyer, if you could imagine, was going through the exact same thing we were going through. You know, having to adjust into a remote environment, having to adjust into many of them, unfortunately, into layoffs and furloughs, and you know, and really trying to process all that, which is quite a thing to chew into. And so for those first 2 weeks, when we were really transitioning out into this remote environment, that pipeline that we saw as like, this is going to come in and we're going to have a really strong quarter, slowly started to dissipate. And then before you knew it, by the end of those first 2 weeks had dissipated. And so we wound up finishing at goal instead of well ahead of it. So week 3 and 4 for the team then became about, well, how do we continue to engage to help these individuals and these companies? How do we continue these conversations? I think one of the things that the team has really done a good job of doing, and they're listening to the market on, is like, how is everything that's going on affecting everybody and on an ongoing basis? I think one of the things to call out is that everything that's been happening with COVID and the economy, it isn't a one-time thing. Like, it's not like it happened and we're still feeling the fallout. We're changing, the buyer's changing the way in which they're perceiving and maybe even reading the content or the information we're sending them every, I'd say, 1 to 2 weeks. And so with that constant ongoing iteration of buying criteria, you kind of have to be able to pivot and understand, you know, how you can change your message and tone to meet what's happening in the market now. So I would say that that's been the biggest change between the first 2 and the latter 2 weeks, is that we've had to constantly try to pivot and understand how the market's been evolving.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. Next question. So with metrics such as, you know, meetings, opportunities generated, taking a hit, and maybe Bryan, in your case, you might not have seen it as much. You know, what metrics did you start focusing on with your teams to judge productivity, whether they're actually getting the job done if you couldn't really see the result? Jackson, we'll start with you.
Okay. Yeah, I would say that the focus somewhat shifted. You know, as Bryan was just saying, we're constantly pivoting. We're finding out how to meet that bottom line, and we knew that it wasn't going to happen immediately. So the focus somewhat shifted to inputs. Right? I want people to control the controllable. They need to understand that the bottom line is always a function of quantity times quality. So in regards to quantity, I wanted specific goals, specific plans. That's the point of those morning goals in an AM huddle. Is I don't want you just coming in and going through the motions and hoping that this all works out. I want you to have a deliberate plan. And if the plan changes, communicate that with me. But in terms of quality, right? I'm sure that all of our companies have coaching software that we use and that we probably underuse. So there was a stronger emphasis on that. I not only wanted to be utilizing that, but I wanted to make sure that my SDRs were adopting that and using it on themselves and with each other. I wanted to make sure that my one-on-ones were at least happening, at least, you know, on a weekly basis, and just really require that collaboration from SDRs, because I found that they often have their biggest breakthroughs when they feel free to collaborate without you jumping in. So I won't necessarily be in on all of those collaboration sessions. I might hop in for the last 5 minutes, but whenever they feel free to say something without their manager's scrutiny, they often make very large strides. And then, you know, lastly, be mindful of what metrics are being written off. Like I said, you want to control the controllable, but a lot of times there's the assumption that a certain metric is not controllable to any degree. So one of those that jumps to mind is like connection rate. for instance, right? People are working from home, connection rate's going to dip. But how much is it supposed to dip, and how much of that is within your control? How much of that is a function of the amount or the quality of list building that you're doing, for instance? So really just controlling the controllable and doing that in terms of both quantity and quality.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there with the call coaching. I mean, there's a huge need for it right now, and I think every SDR organization, whether you have 5 SDRs or 50 SDRs, you got to have some type of call coaching software in place, or you guys are using it if you already do have it. Awesome. All right, Bryan.
Yeah, there's a couple members of my team that I think are on this call. They'll laugh when they hear me say this, but inputs always equal outputs, right? So I resonate with you, Jackson, where you said quality times quantity. Like that's absolutely on point. I think there's a few things though that my team and I've been trying to keep in mind as well in terms of taking a look at the bigger picture. When you're in a remote environment, I manage a remote team. Just to take a step back, a long time ago, before I ever entered software, I was a remote outside sales manager. I had 22 people that reported into me that I never saw every day. And so like, there's an element of autonomy that is expected, and that just comes with professionalism, that that your team's going to produce a certain amount every single day. And your job is to make sure that like you're leaning in where it's going to have the biggest impact, but also giving the leniency to allow them to be able to be productive. One of the biggest things that we saw right away and kind of anticipated seeing is that SDRs working from home that weren't accustomed to working from home had an extreme amount of focus that maybe they were unaccustomed to. If you can think about people coming up to their desk every day, that didn't happen anymore. And people saying, hey, you want to go grab lunch, wasn't really happening. And so they're sitting in their apartment and they're working and they're focused. So one of the biggest things to keep in mind is like, we talk about and we manage towards at Aircall the metrics of calls and emails and social, and we kept that consistent. But I think the other metric that maybe is a little bit harder to put a number on or any sort of gauge on is fun. And we wanted to make sure that our teams were still enjoying what they were doing. The SDR job just in and of itself, and Julie and I have talked a lot about this, is just a really hard job, right? It's a really hard job. And it's thankless in many different ways. But it gets even more thankless when you're stuck in a room and you're not allowed to leave it because the law says you can't. And so all of a sudden, the only thing you're doing is that. So fun has been a really important thing, which then brings my last point. It's like, you need to make sure that you have a careful balance between leaning into the places that matter so that you get the results from the team, but also keeping it light and fun and enjoyable so that people aren't like, pulling their hair out of their head.
Yeah, for sure. Fun. You need to have that fun because it's a thankless job, and you're right. I mean, it gets even more difficult especially for newer people, I would think too, right? I mean, you learn by being on the floor and feeding off other people. And, if you're new at the job and all of a sudden you got to, you're being told week 2 on the job, hey, you got to go home and make these calls from home now.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I first got started in the business, I'm sure all of you on this call are the same exact way, is that when you first got started, you were like anxious and hungry and like, oh my God, I'm going to go crush this and do everything I can to be awesome. And like, right? Well, our teams are doing the same thing, except now they don't have us always around to make sure that they're keeping a careful watch over their psyche. So yeah.
Right. Exactly. Julie.
So our goal was to really try to understand the trends going on with this pandemic and understanding how people were interacting with us, what's changed about that interaction. So we have a pretty good, like my team consistently hits the metrics they need to hit. I have no lack of trust in that. They do what they say they're going to do very consistently and have for a long time. The quality of our messages are pretty high. We have, somebody specifically in that role who develops great content for us that we add personalization to. So it really wasn't around, hey, are we going to hit the metrics we need to hit day to day? It was, hey guys, we're not booking as many meetings as we should be booking or as we used to book due to this pandemic. And let's really try to understand why. And so we took a look at the open rates, the reply rates of very specific campaigns to understand, what trends are we seeing? How are we seeing that on our enterprise team versus our digital team? How are we seeing that in different parts of the globe? as EMEA or APAC may have been in the first wave of this, did they recover at a certain point? So we started to get really granular into opens, replies, call connect data, and we started to see a trend, and we clearly saw our opens dropped, our replies dropped. That progressed to opens starting to recover, replies not quite recovering. And then we saw call connects going way up. And so I had some really badass members of my team. I think Eric might be on here, so I'll give him a shout out, who said, great, like now the leadership team has done a good job surfacing this information to us. How can we take it on ourselves to do some testing? And maybe before, these certain hours were a great time to call. Maybe they're not anymore. Maybe people working from home don't have the same commuting hours and time where they're at their desk ready to take a call. And so there was a lot of experimentation done around what hours were the most successful. Right now we're finding from 3 to 4 p.m. in your specific time zone is really profitable for us. And so we said, okay, metrics are fine. We can keep them the same, but we're doubling down on these call metrics. And in terms of our email campaigns, we're going to diversify the messaging. So instead of having 2 really great campaigns going on, we're going to have 5 or 6, because maybe we're not touching the right people. Maybe, yes, we can kind of all be aware of what verticals are impacted, but maybe there's certain types of personas that might resonate with some material over the other. So we put our eggs in multiple baskets and started to watch those trends again. And I think we have a special meeting every Wednesday. So at the end of today, to go over those metrics and to understand the trends. And, we had 2 weeks in a row, knock on wood, of, recovery to pre-COVID times where we're booking everything that we, wanted to book and more. And are monitoring that as of, these last 2 weeks. Now, who knows if that's just luck or, us playing, to where the numbers are, but I think it's a little bit of both. And the only way to know is to get really granular with the data.
For sure. Yeah. April's gonna be a very interesting month to see. It's the first full month that, everyone's kind of going through all this. So awesome. All right. So what was something, and I think some of you already answered this, and feel free to use the answer again, but what was something that you were pleasantly surprised to see from your teams with everything? Kind of going into, you might have been a little bit skeptical about something, but at the end you were actually pretty surprised or didn't expect that to happen. Bryan.
I mean, it's not that I was surprised or didn't expect it to happen. I have good faith in the team that I support. I think that I was definitely very happy though with the amount of enthusiasm that they brought into a really unknown scenario. So the team has tackled everything with vigor, right? They're open to what could possibly happen and all the unknowns, and they've just really done a great job of coming into this with an open mind. And ways that you check in on that, like on a morning meeting when we're going, or rather on a Friday meeting when we're going over the week's progress. We do our meetings for the week on Fridays instead of on a Monday. And when we're going over a week's progress and how we're doing and pacing the goal, like not only is the team like engaged, they're asking questions, and they're really they're wanting to seek to understand more about how they can think outside the box of what maybe they're not already thinking in their strategy. And that level of engagement is encouraging, especially on the leadership side, to see that like, hey, like things are going to be okay and we're pacing well. And I think it's one of the reasons why, entering Q2 now, we're on pace right now to have the best month we've ever had as a team, and we're remote. And so I think I was really pleasantly surprised to see exactly how the team has rose to the occasion.
That's great. Julie.
So 3 things come to mind for me. I would say, first, initially, I did the Surf and Sales podcast with Scott and Richard, and at the end of it, they challenged me to let my team work remote and see if we could do a call blitz or, hit these certain metrics. And, basically we're testing my trust for that. And, really candidly, there's not a part of me that doesn't trust that they're going to do what, they say they're going to do. It's their pocketbook affected ultimately. So I know that they're invested in that. But I think the first thing that I noticed was like, they were thriving. They were overperforming on metrics. They were hitting every single call they needed to, even when people were hesitant of, do I call? Is that even right to, be pitching sales at this moment? They weren't pushing through it. They were doing it with sensitivity. And so, I think it's not necessarily a surprise, but I'm super confident that they could work remote at any point. And I think that stigma that sometimes comes with SDR teams and having to micromanage them a little bit, like for me, completely out the window now. Not even something I would think about. I think the second thing is experimentation. We are an experimentation company. That's in our blood. So, no surprise there, but just the effort that the team has made to come up and say, hey, let's try this new thing, or I want to be really sensitive to messaging this week. This is really new. I think, we need to change things. We can't just be pushing our agenda and not being thoughtful. Like, let's do something kind without asking for anything in return. Like, they have come up with really great ideas to be sensitive to what's going on and to try new things and experiment on them that have been really successful. So listening to them, giving them a little bit more ownership in that, I think is also something that I've been pleasantly surprised by. And then I think lastly is we throw a lot at them. I think, as Bryan said, the SDR job is the hardest job, but it's also being a crazy multitasker. Like, I look and I'm like, okay, so you're running 9 different campaign messages right now with 22 steps in each of them. And, it's just a lot to put on anyone's plate. And when we started to realize that we needed to diversify our message even more and come up with more, they were like, sounds good. Let's roll with it. We'll take more on. And so that was also pleasantly surprising and something I knew that they had in them, but I've been shocked by the stamina and the like, I'm gonna go crush this sort of mentality that I've seen the team have during a time when, I'm personally in a panic some nights and, played down the situation to where I'm living in a trailer somewhere with my baby and my husband, fighting zombies. So I think it's something to be proud of.
Sure. Absolutely. Jackson.
Yeah, so I'll echo what the other panelists have said. At first, I was a little bit concerned with the prospect of remote management and feeling like the burden would largely fall on me. And I've just been remarkably surprised with how wonderfully they've taken to the situation. Specifically, we talked about kind of monitoring their inputs and shifting focus to that, and their inputs have never been higher, and their openness to problem solving has never been higher. And I think that as a result of that, whenever we are able to get back into the office and take advantage of that environment, they're going to perform better than they ever have.
Absolutely, yeah, that's the hope for sure. All right, awesome. So, well, the last question on the personal experience side, looking back, knowing what you know now, was there something that maybe you would have done differently? I know the title of the webinar is What's Working in Sales Development, but let's take a second, focus on maybe what didn't work and what's something that maybe you would have done differently. Julie.
I would have started the calling efforts a bit sooner, doubling those metrics up a bit. May not have worked that first, the week when everybody was sheltering from home. I think there's a clear buying signal where you see people, I'm in panic mode. I can't even answer this email and don't care about it. I need to take care of my family. And you see that kind of go. So maybe it wouldn't have worked, but I think calling sooner, diversification of messaging, meaning lots of different verticals, lots of different persona. I would have tried to see the future and understand the verticals that really were going to get hit hard. Like, for instance, you can think in your head, entertainment, it might be good if you're thinking of gaming and Netflix and, some of these companies, but then there's also, so we have run some campaigns that are focused towards that. But then you also think like ticket sales are in there, the StubHubs of the world, and people who are getting hit so incredibly hard. So maybe some proactive foresight into that effort. And, I think lastly would be do a little bit of extra work in the beginning to give the team some more leeway of coming up with things that they wanted to run, because I think ultimately we did get to that point, but it wasn't from day one.
For sure. Bryan or Jackson.
Got excited.
Yeah, so two things come to mind. I think early on, I did too much myself. You know, you kind of think of this as a problem that you need to solve, instead of relying on your team, picking out who are the key contributors that can take on more responsibility and help you out there. More specifically, I would have, in terms of my new hire that I was still on ramping, I would have abused shadowing. I would have had him, because I kind of took for granted how much someone just learns by osmosis in the office, that you don't ever have to deliberately tell a new hire that they pick up from the guy next to them. That's gone now. So with new hires specifically, I would have abused shadowing. I would have assigned them to multiple different SDRs, based on that mentor SDR strength, to have them shadow them via Zoom. And then this answer is not exactly sexy, but I would have put something in place for administrative processes, because while it's good to talk about how we can improve our demand generation, every bit of time that we lose because we have to go back and correct an administrative mistake is time that we're not reaching out to people. So I think that rather than I think early on I took a reactive approach to that, and I was kind of playing catch up all the time. And then I pivoted to taking proactive measures to ensure that those things are done, so that it becomes more automatic, and it's not taking up their time and it's not taking up my time, and we're free to put more focus into solving this problem.
Absolutely. Bryan.
So, Jackson, I think give yourself a little bit of leeway there. I think we're all reactive, right? Like that's just the nature of who we are. So, you know, you're going to be a reactive individual. That's the nature of the beast. You know, there's an element of like, we saw what was happening in Wuhan well before it ever hit any other country. And they had already shut down their entire system and society prior to really even presenting itself in the US. And so there was an element of lack of planning, I think, on our end that we could have done in terms of like, well, what if you did a brainstorming session, right? Think about when it first started and you sat down the key leaders in the room, you told everyone to just pause for a moment. We're going to go into a room with a whiteboard and think, what are some of the things that are going to be affected by this, right? Immediately you come up with travel. Immediately you come up with entertainment, right, Julie? Like you were saying, StubHub. Like immediately you come up with these segments and you're like, okay, well, what segments do we not anticipate having direct impact? Who's going to need more of us, not less? And I think we had to be reactive in that regard too. At Aircall, something that we figured out is that out of nowhere, we started seeing segments we've never sold into come inbound, like ever. Out of nowhere, we saw universities come in. We saw governments come in. Like we had the New York Department of Homeless Services come inbound and say, hey, we need a hotline to help people like figure out how to handle everything with going on with the information with COVID. It's like, these are not things that are traditional sales. And so, you know, sooner than later, we should have reverse engineered our inbound inquiries into what COVID-19 ICP is, if you will, so that we could have reverse engineered a little bit more of our outbound practice to meet it sooner. And I think why sooner is because by the time I think we reacted to it, not to say that we're too late, but I think a lot of people put in place their provision that we served to. So I think we could have done a better job of being proactive instead of reactive, especially in terms of our ideal customer profile. Absolutely.
Awesome. All right. So going into advice we give to sales leaders. So this is going to be geared towards each of you. Just for the interest of time, we'll try to just keep it to just one person. But if you have something, feel free to chime in. And we've got some audience Q&As coming in too that I want to get to.
Yep.
So Jackson, tell us a little bit about any advice you have around performance management, in the COVID world.
I would say it comes down to two things. Be specific is one, which I've already touched on, but also be sensitive to the current situation, or be human. Don't sugarcoat things. It's a scary time for SDRs. They're the lowest ranking members of the organization, and unemployment is running rampant. out there. So let them know that whenever you are holding them accountable for something, you are holding them accountable for their own good, and to ensure that that everyone is going to keep their job, and they'll respect that. Similarly, don't let them only hear from you when it's corrective or even work related. For instance, last week I found myself with some rare free time. So I took the time to call everyone on their cell phone and just see how they were doing. And they, of course, their answer was work related, and I would stop them in their tracks and say, hey, work aside, how are you doing? And if you do that, they're going to work harder, and they're going to be happier employees.
Awesome. Cool. Bryan, Julie, anything else to add to that?
Maybe just some banter. I would say that, yes, they are the lowest ranking members of the org, Jackson, but I'd also say they're your MVPs. And so there's some, and I know you feel that way too. I'm throwing it at you. There's some element though, SDR leaders, first off, now more than ever, you need to stand up for your team. Okay. You need to go to bat for them. You need to be able to, you are the sword. Okay. And you're going to lay on it every single time something goes wrong. And you're going to be the person that is going to be highlighting all the things that are going right. And you are not going to have any of the glory. Welcome to management. That being said, you have to be open to understanding that you're in a really weird time. Not all of us have the luxury of being needed right now. And not all of us have the luxury of selling something that is, vital or essential. Some of you are a nice to have. That's okay. We need the nice to haves in this economy. That being said, you have to be open to providing to the organization of value. And if it's not in the sales dev realm right at this moment, simply because your sales function's being impacted, then find a way in order to create that value story. Maybe there's a lot of departments you can help support in a short meantime until things get a little bit back to settled. So just think outside the box to go the extra mile so that your team's always seen as the asset and not an expense.
For sure. All right. So Bryan, for you, advice do you have? I mean, there are a lot of companies out there that are hiring and they're having to do all these interviews remotely. Things to look for, advice that you have for sales leaders that are hiring all over video right now.
You're not going to like my answer on this one. I'm personally not hiring right now.
Yeah.
And there's a reason to it. Our team is we know we're going to go back to, in person at some point here to some extent. And so the short hiatus I put on hiring is simply because I know the importance it is for me to feel like I'm connecting with that individual and my team's connecting with that individual coming onto our family. And it's a work family, guys. We spend more time with each other than we do our own families. So you're going to go interview someone over the internet for a half hour and expect to know them. And I just say, nah, I doubt. It's very doubtful. If you need to, if you're in a place where you have to, take more time than less. Do more vetting. Go speak to people they've worked with before. You need to go the extra mile. There's no skipping stones in this one. That's my advice.
Gotcha. Okay. Good. All right. And then Julie, advice around ongoing coaching and development, something that you've been doing with your team.
Now's the time to double down on that. This is a unique opportunity for people to sharpen up on skills that they don't have, whether it's in your free time and it's personal or it's something work related here. I would say we're getting really tangible down to exactly what type of competencies each SDR needs to master to be able to progress to the next state in their career, who the stakeholders are that need to see that progress, and what efforts they need to put into it. So I would say if you're not working at least every week, every other week on something really major that is going to help you advance your career and also get better at your skills, you need to be. And SDRs, that's on you. Like, as much as you can rely on the management team to help you, and we will, take the time, carve the time out in your schedule during work hours and really start practicing that skill. So, I think be proactive is the advice there.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to skip this last one on incentives just for the purpose of time. But what I want to move to is looking ahead to the future, and this could be for anybody. how do you think this is going to impact remote SDR work going forward? You're hearing about a lot of companies are saying, hey, we're actually just going to keep working remotely when everything gets back to normal. What are your thoughts on this? And Bryan, we'll start with you.
Honestly, sales leaders have been poised with it, and I think we touched upon this a little bit, especially Julie spoke about it earlier. But look, we've now found that it's funny, it's not to say we never trusted our teams. Sales leaders always trust their teams, but there's an element of this remote work segment that has always been nervous for any sort of senior leadership to embrace, simply because when you're used to having something that you can see and feel and show and see it happening, you don't want to lose that control per se. Some people don't want to lose that control. Now we're in this point where we were all pushed into this, and all of a sudden we lost that control, and we found that nothing really happened, right? If anything that happened, our teams lived up to the expectations that we have of them. Our teams are professionals. Our teams are exceeding expectations. So awesome. So to say that, how will this impact remote work? I don't ever see a day in which we go back to what normal ever was. That's never going to be the case. I foresee a 2 to 3 day work week where the other 2 days or 3 days will be from home. I really do. I think that you're going to have mandatory days when the team wants to come together, and then you're going to have days when you're just, you live in this world of expectations are met or not met, and that's the way it works.
I agree with Bryan wholeheartedly. Said it really well. I think the get-togethers that the team will be having will be team lunches out once that segment opens, stand-ups in person from time to time. Yep. Maybe once a week, twice a week. I think for the most part, people will be working a lot more from home. And if you still have a brick and mortar office, managers will at least give them the flexibility to make that choice.
That's right.
Sure. Jackson?
Yeah, I feel that, I don't know about you guys, but I miss the office so much. It was a place that I had to go. And now I wish I could go. I think that there's going to be a new appreciation for that environment. But I think that this is going to prove to be a time that we really value and treasure, because we took the time to put an infrastructure in place to make this work from home possible, as well as to make that work out of the office even more efficient and more effective. So I think that this is ultimately going to prove to be an extremely valuable time, and it's gonna, and like I said in a previous answer, I think that our respective teams are going to come out of this stronger than ever as salespeople.
For sure. All right, well, let's get to some questions here with a few minutes that we have left. Let's see. What has been, this is for anybody who wants to chime in, what has been the most effective leadership tactic you all have utilized during this time to ensure your team is continuing to reach their goals?
I'll throw one out there. I think something that is effective for our team is we do twice weekly crash courses, and we've been able to use Kahoots. I personally just bought Kahoots and Kahoot, and maybe we'll be charging that to my company later. But we use that forum to do fun trivia and quizzes to keep everybody sharpening their skills, and to make it like a collaborative session where people can say, this is how I would have approached it, or this is how I would have. So just that twice a week kind of fun activity where we're also doing work-related things, I think has been really, really helpful. I don't know if it's the most effective leadership tactic we've utilized, but I think it's one that actually is really helpful in keeping the right things top of mind for the team so they can hit their goals.
Yeah, I just add on that. So guys, SDR leadership is not just SDRs. It's funnel leadership, it's pipeline leadership. You need to understand how things are moving down and getting to the most coveted of metrics, which is close won revenue. You have to be able to do that. And that requires a certain expectation of checks and balances between not just your team, but the other teams that are in that pie. So, we are the most cross-functional role SDR leaders, I would arguably say, in the business. You're speaking to marketing and RevOps and sales, and you are the middleman, if you will, or woman, if you will, that has to manage all these different pieces. And so I would just put this out there that you need to be mindful of everything that's happening, to have the checks and balances in play, to make sure that the efforts that are going down are all going towards the right direction. And if they're not, you understand why.
Absolutely. Jackson, anything to add there?
Yeah, absolutely. Bryan just kind of took a very large perspective with this as far as a big picture goes. I'm going to come at it from the other angle and get down to the minutia of it. Where we end up at the end of all this, and in terms of closed won revenue, is going to be a result of the combination of days. Every day comes. It's only about today, and we are all salespeople. We are all competitive, and so I encourage trash talk among my team in a friendly way. Every morning, we pick out a metric. I will encourage somebody to challenge somebody else in a specific metric, and we even keep track of who comes out on top at the. For instance, one of my best SDRs, Andrew, whenever he's decided to pick a fight and call somebody out, he's come out on the short end every time, and he's 0-3, and he's desperate for redemption. And it's just a way to improve team chemistry and team cohesiveness, and make this whole thing a little bit more fun.
Absolutely. Interesting question here around kind of a greater topic around quota relief. I know that's a big topic that's been coming up. Curious to get each of your thoughts. Brian's already shaking his head. We'll start with you, Julie, as well.
It's not quota relief. You're looking at it the wrong way, in my opinion, right? Like, are you going to hit quota in Q2 if you're a non-essential business or non-essential tool or a nice to have? Maybe not. I don't know, right? Are you going to open a pipeline? Yeah. Are you going to be able to have future data? Are things going to get kicked out a little bit more? Yeah. So you need to maybe refocus your metric a little bit, right? You need to understand for your business what the most important metric is in that regard. So you're building excellent Q3, Q4 pipeline that can qualify and close, but it's just like this mixture of what the hell's happening in Q2 that's kind of, befuddling things. In my opinion, that's okay if that's the metric that matters for your business. You have to figure out what that metric is. But to call off even managing anything, then you're really missing the opportunity to speak the bigger picture or the broader picture up north where it matters to your senior leaders. And so when you're telling the story of your sales channel, of your sales development channel, you need to be able to tell the story. Hey, look, like we're doing this amount of input, we're getting this amount of output. This is what that output looks like. This is where we're forecasting that to actually have an effect and when we're really going to feel it. Yeah, this is going to be the delay or the gap or the delta, but we foresee it exponentially increasing our opportunity here. You have to have that story, right? Otherwise, why are you going into work? What's the purpose of your team? What is it that you're doing every day? And that's going to be the question asked.
I think just to add on that, like, yes, you want clarity around all of those metrics. You don't want to throw any FUD in there and, say, oh, this is a special circumstance. So, we'll bubble wrap this up a little bit with some quota relief. But even more than that, this is a moment. This is a moment for every single person to show strength.
Yes.
And to say, given any situation, I am somebody who can add tremendous value to this business regardless. And so this is where the people, as Bryan was saying earlier, go find that value. And maybe your value is different than the person sitting next to you, but figure out a way to contribute to that bottom line in an impactful way. And I guarantee, you'll have a much higher % chance of making any cut or layoff along the way. This is a moment where I can say now proudly, my team, 2 weeks in a row, like they are the sung heroes of this marketing and sales, funnel. And it's like, damn, they rose up during the toughest times. So, don't let somebody take that away from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've been saying it, like if you're an SDR right now, that's eyeing that promotion to, maybe, inside sales or an AE role or a management role, now's your time to show what you're truly made of. You can make it through this. You can make it through a lot of situations, a lot of obstacles in the world of sales. Jackson, anything to add to that?
No, I'm not going to pretend to be able to improve upon those answers. I mean, look forward to being a different salesperson, to being a battle-hardened SDR after this.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I want to be respectful for everyone's time here. We just hit the hour mark. So again, Julie, Bryan, Jackson, thank you so much for taking the time. I know we all have crazy busy schedules with everything going on to share your experiences. Everything's been recorded. I'll be sending the recording out. But for more content, I host a Sales Minute with Nimit, new episodes every Monday on LinkedIn. We also have the Tech Sales for Hustlers podcast, new episodes every Thursday. We interview some of our alum who are doing some great things out in the industry. Check all that out on LinkedIn or on our website. I also wanted to add something extra and Bryan, I'll let you take it from here.
Hey, yeah, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, this is awesome. So we're going to have a State of Sales webinar tonight and tomorrow night. Tonight's is at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. Tomorrow's at 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central. We're going to have a slew of incredible speakers from Kevin Dorsey and Morgan Ingram and Michael Tuso and Ashley Kelly Mealy. And we have this just incredible lineup. Colin Cadmus will be on it as well. We're going to be talking about the state of sales today and the state of sales for the future. I saw a lot of questions in the Q&A here that didn't necessarily get an answer that we will be covering tonight and tomorrow. So if you're available and you'd like to come join us, come join us. It's going to be an awesome event. We're also going to have a breakout session in the middle of it too with different tracks. So it'll be a digital experience. It'll be a new experience for many of us, but come join us. It's going to be really great.
Awesome. All right. So again, next week is part 3. Wrap up this 3-part series all about onboarding and coaching. I'll be joined by Steve Richard, founder at Exec Vision. We'll be doing, I mean, it looks like we're about to have a boxing match or something on this graphic. But it's going to be a showdown to talk all about onboarding and coaching. So again, thank you all for joining, and we'll see you next week. Julie, Bryan, Jackson, thanks so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, Nimit.
All right, take care.